Hi, good evening, everyone. We're back with our series after a long time this time. As always, we hope there are lots and lots of questions, and it's really a discussion. We do want to hear from you. Please do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be able to take them as we go along. Just give us a minute. Pramath is just changing his device and logging through his laptop. So, hi, good evening, Pramath.
Good evening, Seema. Good evening, everyone.
It feels like we've not done this for almost like a month now.
Yeah, but has it been a month? It probably hasn't been that long, but it feels like long.
Yeah, I think you've been traveling and, we've also been busy. But anyway, I thought it would be a good idea to, as the Harappa School of Leadership, as someone who runs a program where leadership has the largest amount of, hours and the most focus. I also, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss what leadership really means to young people. And that's really where this topic is coming from. Oftentimes, I feel like people confuse leadership with being a manager or managing a lot of people. So I just thought maybe, we could start with really what is leadership for young people, and what is that one or two things about leadership that you really need to understand early in life so that you then progress as you go along.
Sure, Seema. I think we can start with at least my take on what this means for somebody, whether you are young, old, whether you are managing other people or not. You can be an individual contributor and still demonstrate leadership. You don't have to be a person in power or a working professional. Your mother can be a leader, your friend can be a leader, your younger brother or sister can be a leader. And so I think it's important to be clear that there are leadership traits in everyone, and you can demonstrate and exercise leadership regardless of whether you have the responsibility of leading a group of people. To me, leadership ultimately for young people is about taking initiative, is about taking ownership. It's about getting things done. It's about working well with other people and marshalling resources and people and getting them aligned and committed around whatever you are trying to do, building teams, of course, as well, in the case of young people. And leadership is also about leading yourself in terms of understanding constantly who you are, how are you growing and developing, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, how do you leverage them, learning from others, observing role models and imbibing some of the qualities that you see in others. And so all of these things actually, to me, are about being a leader and at least preparing yourself to be a good leader as you go forth in life.
But a lot of what you're saying, isn't that like a given, like, the fact that you should perform, or you should sort of, do your the task that you're assigned to, or that you should sort of, hustle or make sure that, I mean, isn't that something that ordinarily people are supposed to do. So if you just do that, how does that make you a leader?
So it's not just about the activity. It's about having an impact. And not just having an impact, but doing things that also leave a mark in terms of your stamp on something. I'll give you an example. And many people have, I'm sure, have these types of examples. But when I was in school, and I don't remember when it was, I was fairly young, maybe grade 8 or 9. I remember I had a pretty big responsibility to organize our school fete. There used to be an annual fete. And now that was something that people would get every year. And that would be something that other people would also be involved in. But starting from saying, putting my hand up and saying, I would like to do this, to then working really hard to make sure that it got done right, to making sure that I added value in my own way by saying, let's do this year, or let's do that this year. Let's do some things that are different and new, which would be my contribution to organizing this. And also ultimately making sure that my work positively impacted and did not interfere or run counter to what others were doing in terms of just collaboration. I think were acts of leadership. And the reason it's different is that the contrast would be that I kind of took it on, but didn't take it seriously, or saw it as an extracurricular activity, or just a tick in the box on my resume to say I did something in school. I did it for popularity. I did it for my friends, and so on. And what didn't actually show the commitment and did not actually take things to the full potential of what I could have done. I think that's the difference. And so it's not business as usual. It's not something that everybody is anyway doing. It's got to be a little bit beyond what other people would do or everyone would do.
So Pramath, is leadership a skill that you sort of start developing, or something that you sort of, sharpen and polish as you go along? Or are these skills or traits that people normally sort of, have, and you can spot them very early in their lives, in their childhood, in some of the things that they do? Is leadership a skill that you can acquire?
Some things are traits that you have, but you can pretty much acquire all of the skills that you need as a leader. And that's why I fundamentally believe that everybody can be a leader, because even if you didn't have the traits, and I think that everybody has some traits, but even if you had 0 traits, you could actually build those skills through learning and practice and honing and experiencing things. I'll give you an example. I do think that I have the trait of being a good listener. I think my parents, the family environment that I grew up in, my sisters, they all are good listeners. So somewhere that may have been a trait that I already had. With traits, it's important to recognize that it's a good trait and nurture it. Often you don't recognize those things. You will have people saying, oh, you don't speak up enough, you should talk more. And then you lose the trait of creating space to listen to others. So recognizing that, hey, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I have to develop the trait of speaking up more, but I shouldn't lose the trait of listening. But building that same example, because I'm a good listener and because I'm also a bit introverted and shy and awkward, you wouldn't be able to tell that about me on this call or on this talk or otherwise if you meet me, but I am. I used to be very quiet. I used to hardly speak. And so I had to develop the ability over time to be able to speak and to be able to speak impromptu. We didn't really prepare for this talk. And I know that you wanted to talk about leadership, but I was confident enough to say, yeah, I'll be able to handle Seema's questions and the audience's questions. Not because I'm coming across as somebody of a know-all, but because I know that over a period of time, I've developed that capability to be able to impromptu, extempore, talk and answer questions. And I think everybody can do that. And if you're not a good listener, I've also met people who don't have the listening trait, but realize that and have trained themselves over time to become a good listener. So I do think that you can learn leadership traits. You can learn how to be a better leader. All of us are constantly trying to be better leaders, and that's a lifelong journey that you're on.
So is that what self-leadership is about? So, is that the fact that if you don't have a specific trait that you believe is important to become a leader, then you sort of go out there, recognize it, shortlist it, and then try to build it? Is that?
Yes. This is the systematic, deliberate way of building your leadership skills. Like you said in the beginning, sometimes leadership is misunderstood or assumed to be only about leading others. But in all definitions of leadership is about leading others, but it's also about leading yourself first and foremost, which is what you're referring to. And in addition, it is about also leading change or leading organizations or leading institutions, which is the other aspect of leadership when we think of, politicians or CEOs or people in high places as leaders. So leadership actually has all three elements. And through your life, you are actually doing a little bit of each of these. In some stages or times and roles in your life, you will one may dominate or become much bigger than the other, but you always have a combination of these three things: the leading others, leading organizations, and leading yourself, that is constantly happening. And so leading self is really about what you said, about very deliberately understanding what kind of person am I, what gets me going, what do I not like, what do I like, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and then shaping your life accordingly and picking up experiences along the way.
Okay. So, by the way, everyone, we're here to answer your questions. There are so many of you on this call. It would be great if you put in your questions. Otherwise, Pramath will answer all the leadership questions that I have, and he's answered them multiple times for me. This is really your session. Please put any question that you have in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to take it as we go along. No, Pramath, I specifically wanted to talk about, when we are young, and when we are talking about, say, leadership, which is about leading others, leading self, and leading organizations. I mean, young people, let's say 3 or 4 years of experience, don't normally get a chance to either lead others or lead organizations. At best, they get to lead self. In that case, what do you do with the other two? How do you sort of lead others and how do you lead organizations to sort of, become more rounded as you're going along?
Sure. I don't think we have to be impatient about getting to the others, but you can start making efforts around that. I'll give you a simple example. When I joined McKinsey in my first year, I opted to organize the office picnic. Now, I didn't have to do that. But I thought it was a good way for me to integrate with the office as a foreigner. I was a very foreign face in the office with some odd habits relative to the Canadians that I was working with. And I would get to know people, they would get to know me. I was building on a strength because I fancied my organization skills. I told you I organized the school fete. I've organized my sister's weddings. So I'm good at doing picnics and events like that. So I knew I could do a good job. So I was leveraging my strength. In the process, I was actually making some impact because people would see, this is a guy who can get stuff done. He's volunteering for a thankless job of organizing the office picnic, for which I'm sure lots of people who would have done that in the past would have said that this is a thankless job. Somebody or the other will have a problem with some aspect of the picnic, the menu, the venue, the travel, whatever it is, the date, and they'll blame Pramath, but he's good. He's volunteering to do this and taking some arrows and scars. And if I do it well, then I will get some recognition for it. And in the process, I'll get to learn a few things about how to get stuff done in a new environment and also a few things about myself. So in a way, by picking that, I was not only doing leading self, which I was doing anyway, but I was doing something for the organization. I was not leading the organization, but I was showing leadership at an organizational level in a small way. And I was leading people because I had a bunch of other volunteers who I was guiding. And some of those people were much more senior than me. They didn't have as much time as I did to take leadership of doing the Christmas party. But my boss's boss was part of the team. And I had to find a role for him and manage him and set deadlines and targets for him. So it was a very interesting experience. And I think that it did make a difference in the office. So I think it was a moment of leadership. Then I'll give you another example. There was a office fundraise that used to happen around Christmas. And we would all try to raise funds to donate that money to charity. And so I came up with this idea with my wife that we would offer a Indian meal for 4. We had a small dining table, so we could only accommodate 4 people. But we decided that we were going to do an Indian meal for 4. And we created a very nice description, printed it out on a piece of paper. That time we didn't have fancy printing, so it was just a white sheet of paper but you know how in a restaurant you take, kali dal or maa ki dal and you write a very fancy description of what we eat all the time. And we did all that. And that became an institution in the office. As long as I used to live in Toronto, we would every year do this. And every year the price of our meal kept going up because people had to bid for it, you see. And so people would bid for the meal and that money would go to charity. Now, I think you may think this is some sort of a fun extracurricular activity, but it was a moment of leadership for me as a junior consultant to take to have the courage to say, hey, I'll serve a meal. People will not be pissed off and I'll do a good enough job and create something that was an interesting model. Over the years, many other people started offering, Polish meals and French meals and so on. So I think it doesn't always have to deal with work. It has to do with the environment you're in. And many of the young people on this call have done this kind of stuff, whether you do volunteer work outside of work, whether you opt for, working for a club in a college or a institutional environment in your educational environment. Those are all aspects of leadership. So I think there's all kinds of leadership opportunities and initiatives that you can take, even while in your primary role, you may be an individual contributor.
Sorry, questions have started coming in, except everyone's putting it in the chat. But let's pick up the first one, which is Ashish. He wants to know how important is the skill of empathy for leaders, and can this be enhanced? I will add, Pramath, can empathy really be learned? Can you learn how to be empathetic? And then how important is it as a skill for leaders?
I think it's very important. It's a Brahmastra. It is like something that can make a huge difference. It's a silver bullet. And absolutely it can be learned. The question is, what do you mean by empathy? And where do you start? To me, empathy is nothing but putting yourself in another person's shoes to understand where they're coming from. And all it means, to my mind, is for you to shut up and listen. Most of the time when people are talking or bringing something to your attention or coming to you with a problem or asking you for something, we are very quick to react. We are very quick to offer advice. We are very quick to contradict them or give them a counter argument or try to convince and persuade them. Empathy, learning empathy is the simple thing of saying, stop, pause, don't react, just listen to that person. And when I say stop and listen, it's also stopping your mind from racing ahead and saying, even if I don't like this, what this person is saying, even if I don't agree with what this person is saying, even if I think this person is stupid and has no understanding of what they're saying, let me actually understand what could be going on that this person is saying what they're saying. Why are they so angry? I don't think this is something to be angry about. Why are they angry? Or if they're saying this is a big problem, I don't see it as a big problem. Why are they saying it's a big problem? Empathy is not, so a lot of people assume that empathy is about compassion and sympathy. It's not at all. In some cases, you may show compassion and sympathy for somebody once you understand where they're coming from. But empathy is just about understanding the situation. And most of us are fully capable of putting ourselves in other people's shoes. It's just in the heat of the moment, we don't give ourselves the space and the time to understand where the other person is coming from. And it's not about having the ability to psychoanalyze that person and see whether you can even start by asking some questions. You may even know what your response is. You may even know what the answer is. But even before you give the answer and give your response, you almost have to do drama. You almost have to play act and say, yeah, I know the answer, but I'm going to hold back. I'll keep it in suspense. It's like a good movie, right? You know where the movie is headed, but it takes 3 hours to get to that. But jokes apart, you step back and you say, what could be going on? Let me ask questions. Let me listen. Let this person explain better to me. And that's all empathy is. It's at least being able to say that I now fully understand where Seema is coming from. I may still completely disagree with Seema, and I may take a very hard stance with Seema and say, no, I won't do it, or I'm not convinced. But at least now I know where you're coming from. And when you get to that point, the other person will also know that you truly get them, that you truly understand them. It's a completely learned skill, as far as I'm concerned.
From what you're saying, it sounds like a leader's job is really to just listen and listen and listen some more. And when do you actually then sort of, go out there and do? If all you're doing is...
Yeah, no. So I think I overemphasized that part because I was trying to explain how to be empathetic. But I always tell people, there's a lot of gyan in this world, and I'm giving gyan right now. And all of the leadership stuff, all of the management stuff, all of the writing on this stuff is about, oh, do it this way, do it that way. And yet we are not able to do it. And the reason we are not able to do it is because we, instead of stopping ourselves to think and to recall what we should do in a particular situation, or what did Pramath say about empathy on that call, we just react because we are programmed to react. This is the amygdala hijack that we often talk about. So this is the fear or fight and run or fight, whatever that analogy is. This is the fast thinking versus slow thinking. And all you have to do is slow yourself down. So I do think that a lot of leadership lessons people intuitively know what it is to be a leader, but they're not able to practice it because they just react. So I do think that one of the biggest skills to learn in all of this, and including in Harappa and at Harappa, all we are doing is teaching leadership skills, but none of those skills will amount to, as they say, a hill of beans if you don't stop to just think, what does this situation really mean and how should I react? Most of us are not able to do that. So it is a core skill, but you don't have to wait infinitely, right? I mean, if you are going to bore me with your story and I'm at the end of the day, like, bored to death and I'm letting you go on and on, that's also not what I'm suggesting. But it really is a matter of putting a little bit of a pause between what you are saying and before I'm reacting. And it can be a short pause. It doesn't have to be a long pause.
Looks like I had an amygdala hijack today. But in any case, all right. So we have an interesting question that's come up from GS. It says, leadership is also about personality tenets. Each person leads differently. But what are the certain essential attributes to be recognized as a result, protected, authentic, empathetic? So basically what he's, I think, asking is, there must be some essential things that across you see in leaders and things that make them authentic and empathetic and, make people sort of respond to them.
Yeah, so I think now you are making me do my entire leadership class at the Harappa School of Leadership, but I'm happy to do an abbreviated version of it.
No. Our cohort is on. Please invite everyone. In fact, I'm going to take this point as a break to quickly launch a poll, and then you can answer, Pramath. I just wanted to know if all the people who've joined here, if you're interested in knowing more about the accelerated management program, I'd be happy to sort of set up a call with some of you. We'll just take 5 minutes on this, Pramath. Sorry, 5 seconds.
Let's do the poll.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know also.
So I can't reveal the answers, but I'll keep it with me and I'll make sure we reach out to all of them separately and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think we're almost there and I'll end the poll now. Thank you. In any case,
you can also keep the poll running. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to, sort of understand what GS is asking you, are there really does everyone have to have the same tenets, or different leaders will have different tenets and you have to sort of?
Yeah. So, I many years ago, when I first started to think about leadership, I also thought that there must be some universal list of traits that I need to have. But then if you start listing down the traits, they very quickly add up. And I've been in sessions which I've facilitated on this topic where you start writing the traits down on a whiteboard and flip charts around the room. You can get to up to 100 traits. And therefore, like GS says, whether empathy, authenticity, results, visionary, communicative, all of these things will come out. You can't possibly be all of those things as a human being. So I went back to the basics and asked myself, so how do you become a leader? And what struck me was, I can't come in here and say, I'm a leader. Somebody else has to decide whether I'm a leader or not. And people do decide. And in fact, for the same person, some people will think they are a leader and others don't. Sachin Tendulkar is a good example.
So is he a leader or is he not a leader?
You have to ask me in which context. So when it comes to leading India as a captain, clearly Mahendra Singh Dhoni stands out. But if you think about being the heartbeat of a whole generation of cricketers and inspiring them and taking them to great new heights and mentoring them and coaching them, and if you talk to cricketers who played with him, they would swear on the hand on heart that he's a leader. So leadership is contextual. But coming back to the point GS is making, it's other people who decide whether somebody is a leader or not. You can't just self-proclaim yourself to be a leader. Now, when people decide, what are they looking at? Of course, they look at it subjectively from their own context. But I did find some common traits. And as you know, I've often talked about, I think there are 3 common traits. The first is leaders get stuff done, and stuff done well. We don't ever list this as a trait, but unless you get stuff done, unless you deliver, unless you actually over-deliver, unless you perform and meet and exceed expectations, people won't count you as a leader. You can have all the attributes. You can be most empathetic, you can be most visionary, you can be the greatest communicator, you can be most collaborative. But if it all adds up to nothing, where the stuff doesn't get done, people won't value you as a leader. People won't think of you as a leader. So that's the first common theme that runs across. The second is that in achieving results and in delivering and over-delivering on expectations, you can't ride roughshod on people. You can't trample people that you work with. You have to be the kind of person who gets it done, but also generates a followership with the people that you work with, where people say, yes, I will again work for this person. I'll work for this person anytime. That's a twin attribute of a leader. In today's day and age, in maybe 30 years, 40 years ago, you could get away by being a slave driver, as I call them, where all you care about is results and you don't look right, left, center on what it does to people. You leave a trail of broken people in the wake as long as you get it done. Today, that's not workable. You have to be a person who people look up to and respect and see as somebody who looks out for them, who makes them successful, and who is somebody they would follow. And the third is the ability to constantly reinvent and change yourself, going back to the leading self point. The constant focus on becoming better and better as a human being, as well as a professional. Unless you do that, you won't be able to deliver, because every time you're given a new task, every time you're given a challenge, some weakness, some limitation will hold you back from delivering. So you have to have all these 3 traits. Now, if you start looking at leadership from that lens, then you'll start seeing leadership traits and leadership outcomes in everyone. And then you'll start realizing that, of course, everybody has a different style of how they will deliver. I may deliver through people, you may deliver through numbers, somebody else may deliver through attention to detail. And it's okay. Some people may not be that that empathetic, but they will still be good leaders. Because empathy is not the requirement. Getting it done, and getting it done with taking people along, is the requirement. And maybe there are other ways of doing that without being empathetic. And there are.
So I think you probably partially answered Nagarjun's question, which was, what is one bad trait that you don't want to see in leaders? So I think, if I'm correct, one thing is that you shouldn't, you might be wanting to get stuff done, but if you're actually leaving bodies in its trail, then that really doesn't matter, right?
Absolutely.
Or anything else that you'd like to add?
No, the only other thing I would add is going back to my first condition. A lot of people do a lot of talk, a lot of planning, a lot of activity, but are not able to deliver the result. You'll find people who are super intelligent, they have excellent credentials on paper, fantastic CVs, great education, worked in the best organizations. You give them a problem and they won't be able to do anything with it. They'll convene lots of meetings, and all of us are parts of organizations where we have colleagues and leaders who will work very hard, who will be there in the office from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They'll be doing a lot of meetings. They'll be busybodies. They'll be printing stuff out. They'll be creating presentations. They'll be sending emails. They'll be doing phone calls. They'll be going off to visit clients. And at the end of the day, the results are not there. It's lots of activity, zero results. And somewhere they think that by actually being busy, they will be able to deliver and doesn't happen. I think that's another thing that you don't want to be doing.
Could it be that you deliver on one parameter and maybe not on the other? Then what happens? I mean, you're doing well in something, but normally delivery is not single, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you're delivering. Maybe you do half and you don't do the other half. Then how do you rate yourself as
I think it's I don't know exactly what you mean, but I mean, to me, you may be doing multiple things. If there are multiple projects and you deliver on some and you don't deliver on some, that's okay. You'll get recognized for the ones you deliver on, but you won't get recognized for the ones you don't deliver on. You'll get recognized for inspiring a next generation of cricketers, but you won't get recognized for losing, the crunch matches for India.
Good old Sachin.
Yes, but equally, half done doesn't get you anywhere. So if you're asked to do something and you don't deliver fully, if you only get to 50% of the way, but you worked really hard, you may get some license the first time or the second time, but the third time people will start saying there's something wrong. And it's a harsh world out there, but we have to understand that it is what it is. So that's something you have to live with. Exercising leadership is tough, and you will fail and you will not be able to deliver each time.
Okay, let's pick up this question from Vinayak. It's in the chat. Vinayak says, what are some of the opportunities that you feel as leaders we should take when we are trying to lead an organization?
I think the first thing is that anything you are doing, you should be thinking about how does it connect to the goals of the larger organization that you're part of. And therefore, if you are able to establish that connection and you're able to deliver on the project, that in itself constitutes leading the organization. Leading the organization doesn't mean that you have to be the CEO. But leading the organization could mean, in this case, the organization could be how your work connects with the larger work of the organization. It could be the project team that works with a particular client. That could be a mini organization within the larger organization. It could be a certain area of responsibility as you grow more senior. It could be a function. It could be a role that has responsibility for a bunch of things. That's a mini organization between an organization. So when one says lead an organization, one doesn't really mean that you have to lead the entire organization. It could be part of an organization. It could be a very teeny bit of an organization. It could be you just alone managing something very crucial in an organization that is critical to the larger organization. It could be you having 0.5% of the target for the annual revenues, but that 0.5% is also the profitability of that organization. And therefore you feel like, hey, I'm actually leading the profitability of this organization if I can achieve my 0.5%. And that's how you think about it. So I think it's really that mindset to say that in everything I do, how does it connect to the larger organization? And how does my unit behave like an organization in itself? If there was nothing else, this in itself would be an organization, and that's how I'm going to lead it.
Okay, let's pick up this question from Priyanka. Actually, she has two, but I'll take the second one first. She says, what are the common misconceptions about leadership and how would you address them? Maybe one or two things, a misconception, and how would you address them?
First misconception is leadership cannot be learned. Of course, it can be, and we've said that earlier in this talk. There are certain leadership traits that you may be born with or you may have imbibed as you're growing up, but there's absolutely no reason you can't learn other traits along the way. You won't be able to learn all traits, but you will be able to do quite a few of them. The second misconception is that leadership is all about power. It's about how big you are, what your title is, that you necessarily need to have a designation, you have to have a span of control, you have to have a big title to be a leader. I think that's the other misconception. let's see. Yeah, and I think the third misconception is that leadership is about having an aura or a personality or being a great communicator and being able to rile people up and get them all excited and charged up, which is the very political sort of misconception about a leader. Those people crash and burn very quickly. You have to somewhere go back to the basics of delivering and so on. So yeah, I think fire and brimstone, role and power, designations, being born with it and not something you can learn over time, all of those are misconceptions.
And Pramath, do you talk about all of this in your classes at the AMP? I haven't attended many of them recently. So do you?
I do
We have
talk about,
Yuvika with us, our cohort 1 learner. Hi, Yuvika. So I'm wondering if she has a leadership question to quickly ask you and see if we can take it from
well,
there.
I think maybe you should ask Yuvika whether I covered some of this. I think I did. And I think like the audience here, people ask me lots of questions about this. This is a very, what should I say, fertile topic, which gets lots of interest and lots of questions, and I'm very happy to answer them. I don't think I have all the answers, but I have a view, at least my own personal view on some of these, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. But yes, I do cover a lot of these in my classes, and I hope people will join the program and come and attend the classes.
All right, we have 2 more questions left, and I'll quickly take Nagarjun's question, which is maybe a short answer would help. Pramath, when and how do you end it when you know that the other person is taking advantage of you being nice? And I mean, you're really trying to help someone, but actually they're taking advantage of you. Is that also something that leaders must learn to do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't like people taking advantage of me at all. And nor should you. I think one of the things that I react to badly, and this goes back to the point about leading others, is that you have to always show respect to people, even if you don't like what they do, even if you don't like their face, even if you don't respect their work, you can't not respect the person. It's hard to do that, and I don't know if I may be guilty of sometimes showing disrespect to people myself. It's hard. It's almost you have to sometimes fight yourself in not reacting to people. But that goes back to the point I was making earlier. You have to create room for you to not lose respect, and at the same time, you don't have to take shit from people if they are not showing respect to you, regardless of, even if you're screwed up big time. Nobody has the right to take advantage of you, and especially if they are sort of doing it and not showing it, or think that they're being smart. On one hand, acting very concerned and doing things that they think will look good for you, but that are actually taking advantage of you. Now, what do you do in a situation like that? I think in a subtle sort of way, you have to let people know that that they are taking advantage or they are taking credit. There's a way to give direct feedback, or there's a way to give subtle feedback. I think trying to get them the message is the first thing I would do. Well, often what happens is that some people will not get that message, or they will react badly to it. In which case, I don't think there's much you can do. If people are not open, there's not much you can do. If you are still constrained, I think what you can do is go talk to their bosses or to other people in the organization who may be able to influence. That's why organizational hierarchies do exist. Of course, we are often afraid to do that because we think it'll have negative repercussions on us. And if both those tactics don't work, then I think you got to move on. I don't think you should hang out with people or work with people who are taking advantage of you, and unfair advantage of you.
Pramath, did you have some time? Suddenly we've got a lot of questions that have popped up. Maybe 5 minutes more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we have a question, and I'll finish Priyanka's question. She had one more. Very quickly, what is the importance of diversity and inclusion in leadership? And any strategy, one or two things that you can talk about promoting these values within an organization. How do you promote diversity and inclusion and, make it
So
part?
obviously, diversity and inclusion is extremely important. I mean, if you are a leader today, you have to recognize that this is actually a source of strength and distinctiveness. Equally, as organizations drive diversity and inclusion, if leaders don't adopt it, then it won't happen. It will remain a lip service. Some of the ways that I do it is that, listen, in your teams, in your work, you have to involve people from different backgrounds, and you have to value that. So you have to proactively look for people from different backgrounds to be on your teams. That's number one. It's the composition of your team, the people around you, the people that you assemble when you're given an opportunity or a challenge to take care of. Number one. Number two, I think you have to recognize that often people who are in minority or who come from minority, who are represented as a minority, will need that extra leg up. So I often turn to the junior most person on the team and ask them to speak up or ask their view, or turn to the woman in the team who's quiet and say, listen, what do you think? Or if they are being interrupted by the guys in the room, to tell the guys, listen, let this person complete her question before you react, and so on and so forth. So I think as a leader, in a subtle sort of way, without showing people up, you have to draw people out, because just by bringing them into the room doesn't make inclusion happen, right? So this is the difference between diversity and inclusion, that you can create diversity, but then people don't feel included because they're just sitting in the room, still being excluded from the conversation. And the third bit about this is really creating a sense of belonging, which is by showing them respect, by going out of your, by letting them know that you are there to support them and mentor them and give them the same opportunity that you would give anybody else. Recognizing their contributions, publicly calling them out. Sometimes you have to do these things at the expense of people saying, oh, why is Pramath doing it for her and not for me? That's okay. That's your leadership, because you're saying, no, I need to make the point. I need to show that this person needs to be recognized. So I think actions on your part to create diversified teams, to push to draw people out, and then to publicly celebrate and recognize them are some of the things that I think leaders need to do for diversity and inclusion at the workplace.
All right, Pramath, we have an interesting question from Ehsan. He says, I think I've pronounced it correctly. He says, I'd like to ask, how do you deal with a problematic junior or teammate, and all, in such a way that you're able to get a timely output from them?
Oh, I think you should take our course on giving feedback. Very simple. You give them feedback, you set goals, and you are tough on them. Say, listen, this is the deadline, this is what I expect. And if it's not there, then I'm going to have to send you back to get it done again. And yeah, I think you have to spell out the consequences. And also you have to be supportive. You have to say, listen, why is it not getting done? So you treat it as a problem and you help together solve that problem. If by repeated asking of getting stuff done timely, maybe the person is not capable. Maybe you're asking too much of them. Maybe you're not giving them enough time. Maybe they're just slow and need more time. So I do think that one, being very candid and direct about the feedback, and of course using some of our ways of giving feedback which are professional, not personal, but focus on the work. And two, as particularly their boss, sit down and saying, why is this not happening? Let's problem solve this. Usually what we do is we say, oh, Seema is the problem. She can't get it done. There's a problem with Seema. I would rather say, listen, the problem is not Seema. Problem is this. This pen is the problem. This is the problem, that is the work is not getting done. Now, Seema, help me understand, why is the work not getting done? And you and me, Seema, together solve for this pen, which is the work not getting done. That's how I would approach it.
All right. Very last quick question from Vishnu says, what is leadership in project management?
Getting stuff done on time. Consistently delivering on time at cost and quality, of course. That's what project management is. And along the way, the additional burden of saying that all the people on your project team should come out saying, I grew through this experience. Not that Vishnu was a great guy to work with, but you know what? In working with him, I started performing at another level. Those would be my two twin objectives of any project management leaders.
All right, Pramath, I know we're almost over time, but Yuvika says that leadership is a journey and she's still understanding leadership, and she believes leadership is all about empowering others and being ethical. Thank you, Yuvika, for joining. She's very special to us, our cohort 1 learner. And we also have a thank you note from Alok, who I believe is your former student and mine as well. And he's wishing you a very happy Teachers' Day, Pramath. Thank you so much. Actually, thank you. I think I've never said this to you, but thank you so much for taking time out, being on the AMP, teaching. I know how busy your schedule is. So thank you, and a happy Teachers' Day, Pramath. And
happy Teachers' Day to you too, Seema. You are a teacher. You helped create so many teaching programs at Harappa for us. So happy Teachers' Day to you and to everyone here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we just had one last question. And, this is someone who says, we often hear leaders are not loved by all. How do you become comfortable with that? How do you sort of deal with the fear of not being loved by all when you're a leader?
You have to realize that when you are a leader, you will take decisions that some people will not be happy with. They will not just be unhappy with the decision, they will be unhappy with you. Second, as a result of that, as a leader, you will not always be liked. There will be people who will dislike you. Even if you don't directly interact with them, they won't like you. They will say things about you. And you'll have to live with the fact that you won't be as popular with everybody as you are with some people. And finally, and this is the tough part, you will never be able to quite defend yourself, even if you want to. Because you can't say things, you can't explain things truly as they are. There's always a backstory to why you behaved the way you did, why you took the decision you did, why you asked some people to leave. And there will be an alternative narrative that people will create. They will maybe create a negative narrative about you and you won't be able to defend yourself. These are all things that you have to realize as a leader and live with it. All I can say is that the way I deal with it is, if you truly believe in being a leader and creating impact and positively impact the life of others, then there will be enough good stuff that will be happening, that the negative stuff will be mere pinpricks and you'll be able to look past them. So you have to create enough of a positive equity that some of the stuff that can maybe feel like unfair or not positive will not overwhelm you, that there's enough to take care of that. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Happy Teachers' Day, everyone.